The Liberal government that won its majority in 2015 in part by promising electoral reform did not, of course, get a majority of the votes. In fact, majority governments in Canada almost never do. It's just one of the features of our winner-take-all system and a big part of why electoral reform has often been debated, though so far not enacted. Will this time be different? Let's ask. Marie Boutriani, Dean of the Chang School at Ryerson University and a former Ontario minister responsible for democratic renewal. Lydia Miljan, Professor of Political Science at the University of Windsor and Senior Fellow at the Fraser Institute. Dave Meslin, Creative Director of Unlock Democracy Canada, and Andrew Coyne, columnist with the National Post, and we're delighted to welcome everybody back here to TVO. When's the last time you were here?
23 years ago.
That is hilarious. I cannot believe it was that long, but we must do this every 23 years.
I've got a child to prove it, so there you go.
Very good. As you all know, the Liberal government is consulting the public through this online survey at My Democracy CA, and they are sending out postcards as well, which people are welcome to fill out and return. And here are a few of the statements the survey is asking us to consider. Let's bring these up. For example, members of Parliament should always support the position of their party, even if it means going against the wishes of their constituents. Governments should have to negotiate their policy decisions with other parties in Parliament, even if it is less clear who is accountable for the resulting policy. There should be parties in Parliament that represent the views of all Canadians, even if some are radical or extreme. So those are some of the typical issues under consideration in this survey. Andrew, you first. What do we think?
I thought the survey was a mess. There's nothing wrong with asking people about their values, although they might have done that a year ago rather than just getting to it now. And there's nothing wrong with putting the trade-offs to them, but the trade-offs that were in that survey were either wildly skewed in one direction or another, or presented false oppositions or extreme scenarios, and didn't get to a lot of the trade-offs that people who would be on the proportional representation, electoral reform side of things, didn't present any of the trade-offs that they would like people to ask about. So I think people were quite right in saying this was not a fair or substantive exercise in public consultation.
Marie, did it look skewed to you, any of the questions?
I think what they were trying to do was engage the public, and notwithstanding the content, and I do agree the questions could have been better worded, I think they were also trying to educate the public. If you want this, then this is the possible consequence. It could have been worded in a better way, absolutely. But I found in my experiences, when I had this file provincially years ago, it's not a file that the general public know a lot about. So if you have a very simplistic question, would you like better representation? They tend to vote yes. Who wouldn't want better representation? But then when you get down to the details, well, you know, this is what it means. It'll cost more. We'll have more politicians possibly. Some of them won't be directly elected. They'll be elected as part of a list or whatever the choices are. That's when they say, what are you talking about? That was my experience. So I think as a way of engaging people, surveys are good. My advice, not that they asked me, but my advice to the government would be to take their time. I know their promise was the 2019 election to have a referendum. That's a small promise to break in favor of doing it right. I learned from our mistakes in Ontario, where we tried to educate the public in a very short period of time, and it didn't work.
We'll follow up on that more a little bit later. Do you see any value in this survey?
I don't understand why they're doing it now. I agree with Andrew on that. And the other thing is it kind of neglects the fact that there was a special parliamentary committee on electoral reform that did a survey. This work has been done, and they filed an over 300-page report giving the detailed results of that survey. So it seems to me that the government really doesn't know what it's doing. It appoints the committee. It gives them this exceptionally short deadline. They had to report December 1st. They met the deadline. The minister then says, oh, you didn't do what we asked. So total humiliation, and then they go out and say, oh, we were planning to roll out this survey anyway.
Just for the record, she apologized
for it, but that's a bit too little too late. And why were they planning their own survey knowing that the committee had already undergone their consultation? Besides which, these surveys, I think, just methodologically are useless, because we can all go online and do the survey as many times as we want. That is not a survey. Yeah. That is an online poll, fine, see it for what it is, but it is not scientific in any way. It's not representative. It certainly cannot replace a referendum, if that's the direction they're trying to sell us.
Not only can you do this survey as many times as you want, but you actually don't even have to be Canadian to do this survey. Anybody, anywhere, can do it. So is there value in this?
The survey has lots of flaws. They didn't ask any of the most important questions, and all the questions they did ask were skewed by having this even if. Every question said, do you want this even if this? Do you want this even if this? And so the question we're faced with now is, does a survey have any value, even if it was designed in a terrible way? And
Which
I don't
way
know.
Do you think, which way do you think the survey leans?
I think it actually leads towards the status quo, because every even if was kind of a scare tactic. So, you know, do you want more representation even if the ballot would be more complicated? How about asking, do you think counting to 3 is complicated?
Well,
Or do you think an MMP ballot, which requires you to make 2 check marks, is complicated? And the answer is that any Canadian in Canada knows how to count to 3 or how to make 2 check marks. So the question was totally led towards scaring the user away from endorsing change.
Or as another simple question, do you think we should elect just a single member by a plurality in each riding, even if the result is that a separatist party becomes the official opposition?
Right.
They didn't ask that.
There's lots of things about the status quo that
Yes.
could be cautionary tales, none of which were raised as possibilities.
Does this look at all to you helpful in leading the government towards an eventual set of options for Canadians to consider?
My sense of it now is that this is leading the government to give up on the file. I think that they have completely mismanaged it. And I keep on scratching my head. This is a problem of their own making, right? You know, the bottom line is Canadians, I don't think that many Canadians voted for the Liberals because of their promise on electoral reform. They had over 220 election promises. We spent a lot more time during the campaign talking about things like Senate reform, things that people were really interested in.
And the size of the deficit.
There's like a million things to talk about.
Syrian
So for them
refugees.
to like make this like one of the central things in the throne speech and then launch their government on this, I think was misguided and in a sense disingenuous. I don't think that they really were that interested. So I don't understand what the strategy was, but it's making them look bad on all different ways. And I think they just want to find a way to move on from it. This survey might be their out saying, again, just to go with their narrative that there's not an appetite for change right now because look, everybody loves us liberals
Well, let's see. I'm
we're
hearing
happy.
criticism at the table that the questions aren't great. So what should they have asked that would have been more useful to the task?
I think, as I said earlier, what they should have said is, from the outset, we will do this later than we promised, but we will do it. And they should do a scientific survey where you have to be Canadian, where you can only do it once, where the questions are not leading, and then follow up with an immense education campaign, which is a lot easier now than it was 15 years ago or 10 years ago.
But they're trying
through
to be very
social media.
democratic here. They're trying to get people involved. They've got the website. They've got these cards that tell you where to go to get to the website.
I understand, and they have a difficult task. I can tell you from my experience, it's not an easy topic to explain to millions and millions of people that simply don't think this way politically. They don't, unless they come from countries where they voted like this. They don't know the difference between first past the post and other types of proportional representation.
What should they have asked?
Well, part of being engaged is being informed. You can't ask a question unless you've gone through some kind of process of public education. That's what we were missing in the Ontario referendum. It's what we're missing now. The literacy rate on this issue is 0. If we walked out the door right now onto Yonge Street and said, what do you think about MMP, STV, or AV, or RUP? They'd say, what are you talking about? So you can't send out postcards saying, you know, what do you think? What they tried to do was gauge people on their values, but they didn't even do that. So they could have asked questions that were specifically about values that could have guided the committee. First of all, this should have been done before the committee, perhaps, because if the committee's making a recommendation, wouldn't you want that informed by public opinion? So everything just seems to be in the wrong order, and it's like they're making it up as they go along.
If you contrast it with the way another big complicated issue was handled, free trade. The government of Canada, I'm sure, consulted widely. I'm sure they had polling and focus groups, et cetera.
This is the late 1980s.
This is the
you're going back
1980s, the Mulroney government. But the way they got the ball rolling was to put a proposal on the table and to, I'm sure as they informed, I'm sure, by all sorts of polling and focus groups, but to put a proposal on the table and then try and pitch it to the public and say, here are the benefits. People obviously would you know, give the opposite side. But you lead, you educate and you lead and you put proposals in front and you get democratic buy-in for it, in that case by an election, in this case maybe by a referendum or what have you. So I agree with that. But somebody has to actually start the ball rolling. You don't just sort of sit there in a vacuum without ever even raising the subject and throw these kind of vague and skewed questions at people.
Well, let's put some numbers out here. Forgive me, Liddy, because I want to get these numbers out here for a second. One of the reasons I guess the government felt a need to at least get this ball rolling, here are some of the numbers that suggest it. If you go back to the last 3 elections, the Liberals last year, they won less than 40% of the votes, but that translated under our first past the post into more than half the seats. Similarly, the Stephen Harper Conservatives in 2011 got less than 40% of the votes and yet got 54% of the seats. And if you look at the Harper Conservatives again in 2008, they got much less than 40% of the vote, and in that election, they still managed to get a disproportionate number of the seats, although it was only a minority government in that case. So the question then becomes, does first past the post, and I guess I should add, 40% of the votes, 54% of the seats, 100% of the power, which is the other thing that people who don't like the current system don't like about it. So, Lydia, should we bring in a proportional representation system whereby if you get 40% of the votes, you get 40% of the seats?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up, because my concern about this whole exercise is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Is the problem, as you say, that you have a disproportionate amount of power to the popular vote, or is the problem that we have a large, sparsely populated country with a party system that has more than two parties involved? Whenever you have more than two parties, you're not going to be able to just mathematically get that 50% seat. So is the problem really the electoral system, or is it the party system? If you go to proportional representation, there are costs and benefits to that. Certainly a benefit is that your House of Commons looks more like the popular vote. The cost of that is that it's going to just have, it's going to give incentives for smaller parties to emerge. And so you're going to end, so if you don't like the 5-party system, you might end up with a 10-party system.
So coalition governments, as far as the eye can see, probably.
That is a higher chance, higher probability of coalition governments, and also a higher probability of smaller parties emerging because they're rewarded to do so in a proportional representation as opposed to first past the post. So
Marie.
those are the costs and benefits.
Sure.
But one of the benefits is also that you will have better representation from unrepresented groups. You could have more women on the list, for example, if they went to a list system or a partial representative system. You could have more First Nations representatives, and you can have people that right now are disenfranchised politically.
You could
so
have
that's
a
one
lot
of the
more,
benefits.
you could have a lot more white supremacists as well.
You can, but that's democracy. And if that's, well, look what happens south of the border. I mean, that's democracy, and that's a message in itself that they're unhappy with the present government. I don't think in Canada that would happen, she says. Who knows if I'll be proven wrong in 10 years. But I do know that when we were undergoing this exercise in Ontario, people would stop me in the streets and say, Marie, in Hamilton especially where I lived, we heard you on TV talking about this voting thing. What the hell were you talking about? It's not an easy thing to explain to people. So yes, you have to properly educate people before you ask them to vote.
Have you come down one way or another over the years after looking at it in so many different ways and writing, I'm sure, dozens of columns about this issue? Have you planted your flag somewhere?
On a particular model of reform?
Yes.
I tend to prefer the single transferable vote, the system.
Explain what that is.
It's just a system of multi-member ridings with a transferable vote to decide between the candidates. All
I'm
proportional
sorry, I don't know what that means. Say that
I'll
again.
get to you in a second.
Okay.
All proportional systems involve multi-member ridings instead of one-member ridings. So right now we have a system where if you have the largest block of votes in a riding, even if it's only 30%, then you get all of the representation of that riding. So only your party's views get represented in Parliament. Proportional systems, the building block of them is multi-member ridings, so that if you get, let's say you have 5 members in a riding, if you get 20% of the vote, you get one of those 5. If you get 40%, you get 2 of those 5. So you're dividing up the representation that more represents the range of views in that riding, and then if you sum it over all the ridings in the Parliament as a whole. The single transferable vote is the idea of you rank the candidates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not hard to do, and then the counting is sort of similar to the way that we've always done party leadership contests, where the bottom candidate after each round drops out and he crosses the floor. We've all seen those scenes, except you do it with a ranked ballot. That's all done in the counting. You don't have to have serial rounds of voting. You're all doing it by just marking down
So
one,
the
2, 3,
lowest
4.
one drops off, and those votes are redistributed.
But
based on
that's,
the other
that's
choices.
getting into the weeds of the counting, which, people always like to say, oh, this is so complicated. I don't know how my car works, but I know how to drive my car. For the voter, all they need to know is you mark your ballot 1, 2, 3. It's not that hard.
So we just heard Marie say, constituents came up to her all the time saying, Marie, what the hell are you talking about? And yet you think this can be made to work, a big national electoral education exercise. How come?
Well, because that's what most countries in Western democracies are doing, and they're all doing it just fine. We're actually the only OECD country that uses first past the post universally for all of our elections. Like, we're very obscure and fringe in the way that we exercise our democracy. And you just mentioned the US election where they elected Donald Trump. We all know that 2 million people voted for Hillary Clinton.
2 million more.
Yeah, sorry, 2 million more voted for close to 3. It keeps going up. So whereas we look at Europe, we know that France is going to be having a runoff. Austria just had a runoff this week. And as Andrew mentioned, every party in Canada uses runoffs to choose not only their leaders, but their candidates in all 338 ridings. The Conservative Party and the New Democrats are both choosing a leader this year using a ranked ballot. So somehow it works for all of Europe, it works for the parties, but somehow for voters it'll be so complicated to change to a new system. It's actually really patronizing to the average Canadian to say that they won't understand the system that all of Europe is using.
I think one of the concerns here, though, is that each different option is favored by each individual party based on what is in their best interests as opposed to what might be in the national interest. And I don't know how you get around this. Marie, everybody's been saying the system that Brother Coyne there just described is good for the Liberals because they get a lot of second place support because they're in the mushy middle. New Democrats and Greens prefer proportional representation because they're unlikely ever to win the largest number of votes, and therefore this is the way for them to up their seat totals. How do we cut through all of the self-interest of the parties and actually put something out there that might be in the national interest?
Well, I think that's where leadership comes in, where you make a decision and you put it forward, as Andrew said, and people vote on it. Just do it correctly. If I had a sort of a magic ball and I would be in those cabinet meetings, from my experience, I think what's happening is other members of Parliament and other cabinet ministers are saying, why are we even doing this? I don't hear this at the doors. I have, I need a highway in my riding. I need this, I need that. And so there's pressure from that side. There's pressure from the parties. The NDP in Ontario as well didn't want a referendum. They just wanted proportional representation without a referendum, without a vote. The Conservatives didn't want to touch any of this with a 10-foot pole in Ontario. So I think there's a lot of conversations and pressures happening. And I'm not trying to excuse them in any way. I'm just trying to let you understand what's probably going on behind closed doors. Not that I know this for sure. No one talks to me. I'm just, from my experience, I think this is what's happening.
I wonder if this is an option. And I know you did this in Ontario back before the 2007 election. Ordinary citizens, couple from every riding, you create a special, I think you called it a constituent assembly back in the day, Citizens Assembly. Back in the day, you lock them up in a room for however long it takes and tell them to come out with a preferred solution.
It's a great model. It worked very well both in British Columbia and in Ontario. The final result was a little different. In British Columbia, when they ran their referendum the first time, they got 58% in favor of it.
So that wasn't enough.
But it wasn't enough because they set a 60% bar.
Yeah.
It is a good model because it takes it out of the hands of the parties, so you don't have the self-interest of the parties engaged. It's not the only model, but it's a good one. I'm not sure if it's possible at this late stage for the government to backtrack and go back to that, but I wouldn't have any objection to it. You could also, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that you could get some kind of cross-party consensus. We did, at least tentatively within that committee. We got 4 of the parties signing on to a common proposal. It does seem clear that there probably has to be some sort of exercise like a referendum to be the final kind of arbiter of this.
Well, the Dems fighting words right now.
Yeah,
because you know who doesn't want a referendum?
The government of Canada.
Correct. A minor technicality.
Well, they haven't said absolutely that they wouldn't, but it does seem like they're not terribly keen on the idea. But if they're going to keep their promise, and I'm not so sure I want to just let them off on that. Yeah, how many people voted for them specifically on that promise, I don't know. But as a general rule, governments, there's a reason why they make promises, and there's a reason why they should be held to them. I can agree that maybe the specific date isn't the sort of the absolute nub of that promise, but the idea that we were going to actually fix the electoral system in Canada after all these years was absolutely a core promise of the party.
Assuming it needs fixing.
That certainly was the premise of the promise, wasn't it?
Yes, it was indeed. How about for you? Is there a way to take this away from the self-interest of the parties and figure out a way either to have experts or, Mr. and Mrs. Everyday Canada study this and figure out the best option going forward?
Well, I think, I don't have a problem with doing that. I guess I'm still at the first stage is what is the problem? The government hasn't convinced me, and it hasn't convinced most Canadians that there is a problem. Only I think 3% of Canadians actually followed this issue. 81% don't care. We just
Dave
don't
is
care.
The 3%.
Well, he's the 3%, and certainly there's advocates, and the advocacy groups are really engaged in this, but everyone else isn't. So I think the very first thing the government has to do do is say, what is it that is so objectionable about this system? What is wrong with our free and fair elections? What is wrong with the peaceful transition of power? If it's representation, then tell us why representation.
Okay.
Why the electoral
Humor me for a
system
second.
is the problem and not something else.
The problem they're trying to fix, they would argue, is that too many votes don't matter.
Well, see, I disagree. I think every vote matters. Sometimes you win a vote and sometimes you lose. When I looked at the guiding principles for this exercise, I thought it was interesting that nowhere in their guiding principles was a peaceful transition of power. It seemed like we want the parties to have power, but there was no principle that we want to be able to have the people change government. See, for me, that's my most important value. I think that the option to throw the bums out periodically is a fundamental benefit of our current system. And so,
Which happens in proportional representation systems
which
as well.
is great. So show me that it does, and convince me and convince Canadians that this system will work, that you're not going to just end up with coalitions after the fact, because coalitions are expensive. I mean, we talk about you might have in PR systems more representatives, which costs, but coalition governments tend to cost more.
Because you've got to buy off the junior partners.
There's a price to everything. And so if you're in favor of higher government spending, more government programs, then yeah, a PR system can benefit that. And those are the things that the debate has to be about. So tell us what the problem is, give us the options, and let's be informed about all the
Dave and then Andrew.
pros and cons.
In terms of what the problem is, I mean, one important piece of data, you're saying 80% don't care and only 3% are following it. How about the people who don't vote at all because they've completely lost faith in the whole system?
Is that why they don't vote?
I believe it is.
How do you know? How do you know why people don't vote?
I've actually
Because they
talked to a
don't
lot of
show
them.
up.
I'm actually writing a book about how democracy is failing, and I've been interviewing random people, and I find it's the most common answer.
So if the system
But
were
my
better...
question,
Hang on,
my
let's just-
point, hold on,
let's
let me give my piece of data. The largest voting bloc in Canada wasn't for the Liberal Party, or the Conservatives, or the NDP. The largest voting bloc in Canada was those who chose not to vote. And more people in the U.S. chose not to vote
In the last
than all
election.
of those who voted for Trump or Clinton. It's the biggest voting bloc in both of those countries right now. People are saying, you know what, forget this.
And you
I don't
think
trust
they
the
can
whole
be
system.
repatriated with a better system?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a whole range of problems that we need solving. You mentioned one and only one, which was that we have a system of institutionalized minority rule. Now, that's a fairly non-trivial objection. And the reason I say that is we have fundamentally ingrained in us the idea of majority rule. And you can see that in our parliament, where a majority of MPs has to pass every piece of legislation. If somebody proposed that, let's let 37% of the MPs pass legislation, I suspect there'd be riots in the streets. The only reason there isn't is because we're preserving the form of 50%, but not the actual reality. They're only representing 37%. So institutional minority rule is one part. The fact that some votes are worth many multiples of others in terms of their ability to elect MPs. We're supposed to have a system of one person, one vote. Again, we have the form of it. We give everybody one ballot, but they don't have the same effective weight. The fact that people can't
Just
vote...
explain that, because some ridings have 150,000.
No, that's another issue, is the different size of
What do
riding.
you
But
mean?
if you look at any given election, it will take, let's say, 40,000 votes to elect each Liberal MP, but it takes 60,000 votes to elect each Conservative MP. It takes 100,000 votes to elect each NDP. And the Greens get close to 1 million votes and get 0 or get 1. So there's a vast disparity in the effective weight of each vote. If you look at the fact that people can't often vote for the party of their preference because they're afraid of splitting the vote. So instead of voting for the party they like, they have to vote for a party they dislike to keep a party they detest from getting in. And then all of those things are just what happens on election day. And perhaps the worst effects of the present system is what happens every day in between, because it's such a highly leveraged system. A 2% swing in the popular vote leads to an enormous swing in the number of seats. One consequence is we go through incredible lurches back and forth from election to election in terms of the policies that are enacted, not because public opinion has shifted that way, but because a few swing votes have gone back and forth. So, for example, in Ontario, we went from David Peterson's Liberals to Bob Rae's NDP to Mike Harris's Conservative in the space of 5 years. Did the public opinion shift in Ontario that way? No. That's incredibly destabilizing. The final point is, the argument that's supposed to be for our system, as it is now, is, well, whatever its other faults, it produces stable majority governments.
Yep.
9 of the last 20 federal elections have resulted in minority governments. You might get stable majorities if you only had 2 parties, but we haven't had 2 parties in Canada since 1921. So we have a system that's not suited to the actual landscape of the parties that we have. It's not producing stability. It's just wildly oscillating between unstable minorities and unrepresentative majorities. And those minorities, final point, are unstable for that leverage reason. Again, we think of minority governments as being unstable because everybody's got their finger over the button because they think, oh, 2% swing in the polls, we're going to force an election. When you take the leverage out of it, when you have a proportional system, everybody calms down. They know that they can't, there's no big upside in forcing a quickie election, and you just get on with governing.
Marie.
The other advantage is, in contrast to today's backbenchers, there's more power with the average parliamentarian as well. Right now, if you vote for, and your candidate wins, but it's not, they don't form the government, they don't represent the government, they're almost powerless. All they can do is yell as an opposition. So that one advantage of a coalition government, which can come out of a proportional representative model, is your candidate, the person that you put in for your city, has a voice, a real voice, not just a loud voice, but a real voice in decision making. So in that sense as well, in contrast to our system today, it's a better system.
Well, let me follow up with you. One of the arguments I used to hear about why first past the post was okay, we'd get majority governments even though they didn't get anything close to the majority of the votes, is that it didn't really matter what party was in power. They all kind of governed from a sort of a big middle. You know, a little bit more to the left in some, a little bit more to the right in others, but basically they might get elected with 40% of the votes, but they governed with an eye towards satisfying a much bigger chunk of the electorate. Are we in those times anymore?
I would agree that that could be the case for the big federal issues, but for the local issues, I would disagree with that. I think for the local issues, if you're a backbencher, you don't have much say at all as to what happens. You can just speak loudly, and if you're a government backbencher, you may get something. If you're not, you just have to fight and run rallies. I would say it's not. That's not a correct point for the local issues in particular.
So, Dave, they're going to collect all this information, and what are they going to do with it?
It's very unclear, and I don't think they know. I mean, let's be honest here. This election promise was made when they were in third place in the polls. Yeah. They were hoping to maybe secure a minority government, in which case it would have been a very easy promise to keep, because they probably would have moved legislation for a ranked ballot that wasn't proportional. The Conservatives and New Democrats would have voted against it, and that's the end of that. They kept their promise, and it was voted down. They never, I don't think, imagined at that time they'd have to keep this promise in a majority context. So the question is, how do we salvage this mess? And I think a citizens' assembly, as you mentioned, is a great idea, because it takes it out of the hands of politicians who definitely have a conflict of interest. These things are more commonly now called citizens' reference panels. They're being used by governments all across Canada at all three levels of government. It takes randomly selected citizens through three stages of a process. The first is education. The second is consultation, where they hear from members of the public, and then facilitated deliberation. And it worked great in Ontario in 2006,
that's exactly what they did almost 10 years
and
ago.
I'll be even more cynical than you are, what you suggested about the party's view.
Not a cynic.
Well, you were suggesting that perhaps each party has a different system they want to switch to.
Sure. I'm
actually, at this point, quite convinced that none of the parties want any change. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP, the party strategists behind the scenes, are quite happy with the system we have. And
okay, Liberals and Conservatives, I understand, because they profit from the status quo. Why would the NDP support the status quo?
Let me ask you this question. The NDP, of all the parties, has the closest relationship between its federal and provincial counterparts. And the NDP has had majority governments in recent memory in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia, including right now Rachel Notley as a majority government. Her chief of staff is Brian Topp, who I believe has some connections to the federal NDP.
He ran for the leadership
What is
last
she
time.
doing on voting reform? The NDP has never lifted a finger on voting reform when they've been in power. So I think it's really important for me as an advocate and as a strategist to have a bit of doubt about the motivations of all the parties. The parties would rather wait 8 years for a fake majority, and now that they've won Alberta, they think they can win Canada. All the parties would rather wait for a fake majority than have to learn how to share power and compromise. So what we need to do is take this whole thing out of the hands of politicians, but not just jump to a simple binary referendum, which we know will take place with an uninformed electorate and will give us a result that isn't necessarily helpful.
I do want to pick up on
A citizens'
that.
reference panel is the way forward, because
Okay.
it solves all those problems.
Let me pick up on that, because that's exactly what we did in the province of Ontario back when you were the minister. And, you know, the referendum ran simultaneously with the 2007 general election, and it got shot down overwhelmingly. The idea that was put forward was shot down overwhelmingly.
But I've said this before publicly, and I don't mind self-criticizing. We made mistakes. If I had to do it all over again, because I received that ministry 2 years before the election, I would have said, we don't have time. We didn't even have legislation to hold referendums. Never mind. We managed to do that. We managed to get the citizen assembly. We managed to have a great educational experience for them. We had a youth citizen assemblies too. It was wonderful. But then we had 6 months, and this is before social media. We had 6 months to educate 12 million people. Well, whoever the percentage of 7 million voters,
Yeah,
on a complicated system, complicated to Ontarians because they weren't used to that system. So that was our fault. That was my fault. If I had to do it all over again, I would say to my Prime Minister or Premier, let's do it next time. Let's spend the next 4, 5, 6 years educating the public.
And would you do the Citizens Assembly process
I would
again?
definitely do the Citizens Assembly process, and it wouldn't just be 6 months, it would be a year, it would be 2 years, there'd be more than one assembly.
What did they?
You know.
Sorry, go ahead.
President Company accepted. The government basically dropped it. I think we can say, quite frankly, they did not promote the thing at all.
Well, not only
Hardly
that,
anybody
after the election, they dropped the portfolio entirely.
Well, and hardly anybody knew that the referendum was on. The media did a particularly abysmal job in terms of explaining it.
You were the
but
only
that
one.
was, but that was then. Okay, that was what, 10 years ago. A lot's changed since then, and I think the quality of the discussion now is much higher. We now have, for example, we had the BC referendum, as I mentioned, where they got 58% in favor the first time. We've had the PEI referendum.
What happened there?
Where it passed with a majority.
They used a different ballot.
it-
PEI allowed the voters to choose between 5 options, and they used what I think is the most common way to run any single winner election, which is a ranked ballot, where if you're asking a bunch of people for their opinion, you might as well make sure that at least a majority gets their way.
Yeah, and
And,
there's no particular reason to make it a binary yes/no
Right.
reform or status quo. There's no reason why the status quo should get a buy into the final round, if you will. It should be one option amongst several. So I think the PEI, it was maybe a little too complicated the way they did in PEI, but the basic idea of having more than 2 choices on the ballot, a ranked ballot, I think makes a lot of sense. Shows that people were able to process it and make a choice. I should mention the state of Maine has also just passed a ballot on ranked ballots. So
Statewide.
the issue is
They're
much
all
more in the
statewide.
air now. I think there's better quality. It's still a long way to go, but there's a better quality of public discussion and public education on this. And so I don't think people should be afraid of a referendum. I think the details of how it's arranged matter, but I don't think people should be
Lydia,
afraid.
let me, with just a few minutes left here, let me get your take on whether at the end of the day we need a referendum with 2 choices or more choices or what?
Well, I think if you're going to do something as fundamental as change the voting system, it ultimately has to go to the people. People are going to make the decisions. So certainly a referendum is important. I think that the question, anytime you have a referendum, you have to have a clear question, clear answer. Certainly, I'm not a favor of ranked ballots just because you're getting people more than one choice. The thing about voting is you got to make a choice, make a decision. Which do you prefer? X, Y, Z. Tell us what you prefer, and then we can count the votes. The ranking, sometimes you end up with not anybody's first choice. You end up with second and third choices, and we see that in leadership contests. But certainly having all the different options available and having an education campaign, first to tell us, again, why we want change, what is wrong with the system, and whether or not the electoral system is going to solve the problems that were perceived to be there.
So let me just understand your referendum question. Would people go into a ballot box and say, status quo, first past the post, or option B, whatever that is?
Option B or option C or option D.
Well, you're in favor of more
You can
options.
give all the options. I mean, I don't care. I'm not writing it, but I don't have any sort of horse in this race, except that the people should be able to choose, and they should know why they're choosing. And ultimately, that's how the decision should be made, because then it's out of the hands of the politicians who are all self-interested, and they'll adjust, right? Political parties are great at adjusting to get more votes, so I'm not concerned about that. It's just a matter of what are the consequences of the decision that we make.
Mr. Director, can you go to a wide shot here for just 1 second? And I want to see a show of hands here on how many people actually believe this will all be done and rendered effective in time for the next federal election, which is what the Liberal promise was. Show of hands, please. Boy, not a 1, eh? You all think the Liberals are going to break their promise on this?
I don't know for any certainty, but if I had to guess, I would say at this point, it's looking very dim, very glim.
Because there's just no
They ran out of
time,
time.
or
Technically, they
will,
run
or
out of
what?
time.
They whether deliberately or not, they have left too little time. They have not engineered a process, a way forward. There's the divisions amongst the parties, et cetera. So at this point, if you're guessing, it doesn't look good.
Steve, I'm actually hoping they don't meet their target because I think this process, to do it right, takes time. And I think if we rush this, we'll end up with something that none of us are happy with, and it could even be a huge step backwards.
So you would advise them to take their time and let the next election go through first past the post the way we've always done it. I'm seeing heads nodding. And
But
then
perhaps hold a referendum on that day. That gives them 3 years to plan a good referendum. Because as Andrew said, it's not about whether we have a referendum or not. It's what does it look like, and who's writing the question. You can rig a referendum, or you can have a fair process. But for them to try and bring in, especially a proportional system in time for 2019, doesn't make any sense to me.
Gotcha. That's our time, everybody. They've got more time to figure this out, but we don't. I want to thank Andrew Coyne with the National Post, Lydia Miljam with the Fraser Institute and the University of Windsor, and on the other side of the table, Marie Butriani from the Chang School at Ryerson University. She's the former Democratic Renewal Minister in the province of Ontario, and Dave Meslin, voting reform activist extraordinaire. There we go. Thanks, everybody.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.